Hello guys, Annala Mooke here, and today we're going to be continuing reading Emily Windsnap and the Monster from the Deep, which is book 2 in the series. Chapter 4. Shona didn't talk to me all week. That first week in our new home, it was supposed to be a fresh start, a dream come true. Instead, it was the worst week of my life. Think Brightport Junior High's worst moments and multiply it by 100. I was still the odd one out, still the one who didn't fit in, who no one wanted to know. Was it always going to be like this for me? Shona started hanging around with Marina and Althea. Maybe she thought anyone was better than me. Maybe she was right. After all, I was the idiot who had finally gotten to live with both of my parents and been given a new life on an island full of merpeople and glistening turquoise sea and white sand beaches. And what did I do? I couldn't bear to think about it. And yet, I couldn't think of anything else. I even forgot to be scared of starting school. I drifted through it, like everything else, in a daze. I couldn't even get excited when I learned to dive with the grace of a dolphin and brush my hair like a real mermaid and sing the wordless songs of the sirens. None of it mattered. Everything was ruined because of what I'd done, and marred by a constant fear of the consequences. What was going to happen? Had it already started? The weather had changed a little since we went into the cave. Nothing all too dramatic. It had just been really windy, sudden sharp gusts making the sea all choppy. Probably just coincidence, but people had been commenting on it. Millie and Archie came over one night. Millie stared at me all the way through dinner. "Are you all right?" she asked as she helped herself to a huge scoop of ice cream. Mom turned to look at me, cupping my chin in her hand. "Are you, sweetie?" she asked softly. You have been quiet." "I'm fine," I snapped. "Why shouldn't I be?" "Your aura's looking gray and patchy," Millie said. "Usually means you're fighting demons in your mind." Dad burst out laughing. "Don't think my little un would stand a chance against demons," he said with a smile. Millie glared at him. I got up to clear some plates, anything to get away, but just then the boat rocked violently as a wave thrashed against the side, knocking half the dishes from the table and tipping me back into my chair. Archie and Dad darted outside to see what had happened, while I helped Mom and Millie pick up the broken dishes. "Freak wave," Archie said, pulling his hair behind his head as they swam back up to the trapdoor to join us again. "Seem to have been a few of those lately. Wonder what's going on. I'll have to report back to Neptune about this." "Neptune? Why?" I asked. "It's my job to keep him informed of everything. That a problem?" He seemed to look at me suspiciously as he spoke. I must have imagined it. A freak wave couldn't have anything to do with me, could it? On Friday morning, I bumped into Shona on the way to school. She avoided me all week, but could hardly pretend she hadn't seen me when I was right beside her in the water. For a brief second, I wondered if she wanted to make friends again, but the look on her face said otherwise. Her expression was like mine when I'm faced with a plate of mushy peas or a spider near my bed. "Have you told anyone?" she asked, pulling me into a tiny cavern that led off from the main tunnel toward Emerald Cave. "No, I don't know what to say." What are we going to do?" "We?" She stared at me. "I didn't even want to go up that stupid creek in the first place. I didn't want to go into that cave. I didn't want to knock the wall down. I am not going to do anything." A tear burned the corner of my eye. I'd never seen Shona like this. "Well, what am I going to do, then?" "I don't think we should say anything," she said more softly. "We just forget it, okay?" "Forget it?" "Pretend it didn't happen. Whatever it was, it must have gone back where it came from. It didn't follow us, so we say nothing. Please?" "But what if..." Think about it. We've only just gotten here. Do you want everyone to hate us before we've even had the chance to make friends?" "Of course not, but nothing. We leave it. Please, Emily." I nodded. "Okay." A drop of water plopped down from the ceiling into the pool between us. "You're still my best friend, aren't you?" I asked as we set off along the tunnel. Shona didn't meet my eyes. "Let's just act normal, okay?" A couple of merboys were coming along the tunnel. Shona smiled at them as they caught up with us, and then swam ahead with them. I trailed behind, pretending to get something out of my bag. I didn't want anyone to think I was all on my own with no friends, which is exactly what I was. We hadn't gotten much farther when I noticed that the water around me was swaying and swirling. It was building up, spinning around. I tried to move forward, but got thwacked against the side. The monster. Was it here? The caves were shaking. A thin stalactite fell and crashed down from the ceiling, missing me by inches. I jerked backward through the water, scraping my back on the wall. Within seconds, mer people were rushing from the caves. "Quick, out!" a merboy shouted as he raced past me. I didn't need telling twice. We pelted out through the tunnels, back to open water. Outside, others were already gathered. Someone was swimming in between them, talking to the groups of people, telling them to move on. Then he turned, and I saw his face. "Archie, what was going on?" I swam over to him. He hardly looked up. "Just follow the others," he said gravely. "We'll meet in the Grand Caves." The Grand Caves? The ones Marina had told us about. But weren't they only for really special events? I followed the others in a daze, my mind swirling with images of what I'd seen, and fears of the destruction and horror that might be ahead. My thoughts turned like the sea. I gasped as I entered the Grand Caves. Impossible shapes hung all around us. Upside-down forest, frozen bunches of arrows waited to fall as one. Long paper-thin flaps that looked like dinosaur wings dripped from the ceiling, bounced off majestic boulders into the pool, ringing out like church bells. Ahead of me, a stone platform jutted over the water. On one side, thick marble-like columns reached down from the ceiling into the depths of the water, frilly edges folding around them like icing on a cake. On the other, the wall stretched up like a cliffside, stalagmites lining its surface, clumped together in chunky groups. Lanterns glowed among them, spreading shimmering lights across the pool as they shook. The walls were still trembling. Surely it wasn't safe to be inside if that was an earthquake. I looked around for someone I knew. Shona had disappeared. Probably with Althea and Marina, I thought miserably. In front of me, a long wooden walkway divided the clear azure pool. A few people were carefully picking their ways along it. I looked away, feeling guilty as I did so. The last thing I needed was for Shona and the other mermaids to see me as one of the humans. They'd never want to be my friend then. But then I spotted Mom. She was there too, edging across the walkway with Millie. "Mom?" I couldn't stop myself from shouting out. She looked up and waved briefly before grabbing the rails as the cave shook again. She pointed up to the stone benches that stretched high up on the sides of the cave. I wondered if I should get out of the pool and join her. A glance at the mermaids. No, I was staying in the water. Then another mighty crash thundered through the caves, throwing me under, leaving me with no choice anyway. Gasping, I gave myself up to the water. It wasn't as bad underwater. It was a little like a jacuzzi. It might almost have been enjoyable if it wasn't for the fact that I didn't have a clue what was going on. My best friend wasn't speaking to me, and the island seemed to be crumbling around us. As I resurfaced, I spotted Shona with Althea and Marina. I knew it. A shot of anger speared through me. It wasn't fair. I hadn't exactly gone to the lagoon on my own. She'd done wrong just as much as I had. Nearly. I mean, it wasn't as if I'd forced her to go, and it was their suggestion in the first place. She looked up and caught my eye. Just for a second, I nearly smiled. Then Althea said something to her, and she turned away. She didn't look back. Traitor. This was worse than Brightport Junior High. At least I could sneak out at night to meet Shona. Now I'd lost her, and it seemed as if all three of them had turned against me. It was so unfair. I'd be better off going back to Brightport, I thought, my heart heavy, my eyes stinging with tears. I didn't have long to dwell on it, although all thoughts were catapulted out of my mind by an explosion of rocks as the cave shook even more violently. A column that looked like marble fell into the water with a mighty splash. Forests of stalagmites shuddered and trembled. I looked up to see Mom gripping the bench. Millie was holding her arm and looking serene as anyone can look when they're sitting on a bench that seems to be doubling as a seaside rodeo horse. Where was Dad? I scanned the pools, and then I saw him. Terror on his face. He was hurtling across the pool. "Emily!" he cried into my hair as he pulled me towards him. I grabbed onto him while the caves crashed and crumbled all around us. It was growling. It was growing louder. It sounded like thunder, cracking right over our heads, coming from everywhere. And then something happened. Something almost familiar. I almost knew it was going to happen, almost remembered it from somewhere else. The shaking stopped, just like that. The sudden stillness was almost as much of a shock as the violent movement that had come before it, throwing people across the floor, dunking merfolk under the water. I gripped Dad so hard it must have hurt him. He held me close. Look, someone was calling out. I turned to see what everyone was looking at. The caves were splitting. A crack opened up, starting from the base, shaking and creaking as it crumbled open. The whole thing would fall in on us. We'd be buried alive. Oh God, the monster, it was here. I fought back waves of terror, but I soon realized that nothing else was moving. Just one section of the cave was splitting open, almost like a hidden door, almost as though it was being opened by someone, or something, or Neptune. The caves had split wide and high enough to let in the thick shaft of sunlight. I had to cover my eyes. When I opened them, I saw him, riding into the caves, shrouded by dusty sunbeams. First the dolphins, then the chariot, golden grand, carrying Neptune into the caves. I should have known. I'd be found out. His voice burst into my memory so clearly, I could almost hear it. The memory so sharp, standing in front of him in his courtroom, listening to him tell us we'd be spared prison on the condition we'd come to this island. If you break this condition, you will be punished most severely, he added in the booming voice of his. Had I broken it, what would he do to me? The dolphins pulled Neptune into the center of the cave before swimming back into the corners, surrounding us like bodyguards. Archie swam beside the chariot, pausing to wait for silence. Neptune rose in his seat, lifting his trident in the air. As he waved it above his head, the cave closed again, sealing us in together to face his wrath. I knew what that was like. Knowing I was to face it again was almost enough to make me give up hope altogether. Neptune looked around the caves. Do you know why I'm here? He asked, his voice deep and grave. His sentence echoed over and over. Know why I'm here. Know why. No. No one dared to answer. No one knew. Almost no one. He was here for me. I was sure of it. I tried to calm my thumping chest before Dad heard it. I shall ask another question, he said, his voice ringing around the caves. Do you know why you are here? He looked around, narrowing his eyes. I willed myself to shrink into nothingness. Luckily, his gaze passed me by. More silence. Neptune clicked his fingers. At once, a line of seahorses appeared at the side of the caves. They gathered into a perfect formation and swam together. Then, hooking his golden gown in their tails, they raised it up behind him. Neptune sat down and nodded curtly, his diamond-studded tail fanning out in front of him. The seahorses instantly darted away. I will tell you, Neptune said. You are here because of me, because of my generosity. This island hasn't always been the happy little paradise you have here today. This once a place of grave importance. He banged his trident on a rock. Archibald? Archie swam forward. Then, bowing low, he kissed Neptune's tail. Your Majesty, he said solemnly. I'd never seen Archie look like this. He had a golden sash running along his tail. His hair was tied back in a neat ponytail and seemed to shine with splashes of deep green against the pool's reflection. Tell these folks their history, Neptune said coldly. It's about time they were reminded. Then he sat back in his chariot, waving his trident at Archie to beckon him forward. The caves became silent as we waited for Archie to speak. He cleared his throat. Many years ago, he began, life here was very different. The Bermuda Triangle was an important stronghold. Together with a most trusty servant of Neptune's, our bravest sirens worked well here in the rich waters around All Points Island. Archie paused. His tail flicked nervously. His cheeks had reddened a touch. This is where ships were brought down. They were relieved of their riches, which were returned to the rightful owner of all the passes of the sea. Ships were brought down? That wasn't what he told us on the way here. He just said that they disappeared, not that we were they were brought down on purpose. Right here. Was our new home one of those ships? Maybe someone had died in my bedroom. My mind swirled with grim and gruesome images, bodies under my bed, killed by the trusty servant. Does he mean the monster? This place wasn't paradise at all. It was more like a setting for a horror film. I can hardly concentrate as Neptune started talking again. Thank you, Artevel. And then what happened? Archie glanced back at Neptune before clearing his throat again. They are the trusty servant I told you about. One day he... Tell them when, Neptune exploded. Almost 100 years ago. Exactly! Not 100. 92 years ago. Do you hear me? 92. This is my point. As she shouted, a wave washed through the pool. I held on to Dad to steady myself. Neptune sat back down in his chariot, his face purple with rage. He clicked his fingers, and a dolphin rushed forward. Turning onto its back, it flipped its tail in front of Neptune's face like a fan. After a while, Neptune cooled down and waved the dolphin away. He motioned to Archie once again. Continue. 92 years ago, this trusty servant went to sleep. Dad pulled away from me. You're talking in riddles, Archie. What was he doing? Had he forgotten how powerful Neptune was? Or that it was only thanks to him that we were here? Or how easy it would be for Neptune to send him back to prison? He let go of me and swam towards Archie. Tell us what this is about. Who is the trusty servant that you keep mentioning? If you're telling us a story, tell us the whole thing. Archie glanced at Neptune, who shrugged disdainfully. All right, Archie said. I'll tell you. He took a deep breath. I'm talking about the Kraken. The cave filled with sound, people whispering, talking, gasping. Mer people turned to each other with questions on their face and fear in their eyes. A Mer girl from my class was in front of me in the water. What's the Kraken? I asked in a whisper. I think in my heart I already knew. It's a huge, fierce monster, she whispered back. It's just a myth, though. It's not real. She turned back to Archie, or at least that's what we've always thought. My body shook. My tail was spinning vigorously. The water was frothing around me. A mermaid I didn't recognize, held up her hand. She had deep wrinkles in her face and piercing blue eyes. Archibald, if this is true, why didn't our parents tell us about it? My great-grandparents would have been alive while it was around. Surely they would have passed this on. Archie glanced once more at Neptune for approval, a brief nod in reply. The merfolk who lived here at that time were the Kraken's keepers. The Kraken works for 100 years, then sleeps for another 100. The last time it went to sleep, one small ship somehow managed to find its way through the triangle's border. With no Kraken to bring it down, the ship ended up here. Archie looked at the people sitting along the stone benches. Those folk were your ancestors, he said. And we don't know anything about this. But we don't know anything about this, one of the women called down. I recognized her from one of the ships in our bay. Surely someone would have told us. Once the people had landed on the island, it turned out that many of the merfolk were happy for them to stay. In a short time, friendships were formed, apart from a very small number of Kraken keepers who were assigned special duties elsewhere. Most of the merfolk decided to stay here, as did most of the humans. You haven't answered my question, the woman shouted. Memory drug, Archie said simply. They volunteered. That was their choice. All of them? The woman insisted. They're merfolk too? We can use it on anyone, Archie replied, and it will wipe out almost everything. What remains? Well, you have all heard half-tales, stories you never quite knew what to make of, myths passed on and distorted with every telling. Archie's words were slowly filtering into my brain. I didn't want to understand, didn't dare to follow his thinking to its logical conclusion. But the memory drug, well, I knew all about that. It was what my mom had been given for 12 years, so that she wouldn't remember that she was married to a merman. Fed to her in so-called treats from her so-called friend, Mr. Beeston, the so-called lighthouse keeper. He'd always given me the creeps. He used to drop by to visit Mom all the time for coffee and donuts. He never said a lot, but he just had this really odd manner. He'd look at me sideways, and his eyes were different colors, and his teeth were crooked. Well, he just made me uncomfortable, and then When it turned out he'd been spying on us my entire life, it all made sense. I'd half forgotten him in the end. When he helped me back at Mandy Rushton, he used the memory drug on my class, so no one would remember me turning into a mermaid. But he wasn't to be trusted, and neither was anyone else who went around doling out that drug. As you all know, Neptune is just and kind As you all know, Neptune is a just and kind ruler, Archie continued with a slight cough. He allowed them to live together here on the island. No one needed to know about the Kraken. Not yet. And so, you are here today. All Points Island has existed in this way for 92 years. A mermaid with glitter in her hair and a pink tail that flicked and splashed in the water raised her hand. But why are you telling us this? She asked in a timid voice. Why now? And who are you anyway? We hardly know you. Neptune rose from his chariot, motioning Archie to move out of his way. Archibald works for me, he said, and he has told you your history. Now, let me tell you something about your present. He sucked in his cheeks, clenched his teeth. Someone, he said almost in a whisper, someone has dared to challenge my power. He took a breath, lifting his trident in the air. Then, in a voice that shook the caves as much as his rival had, he bellowed, someone woke the Kraken before its time. Darting backward and forward in the pool, agitated and angry, he spoke quickly. 8 more years. That's how long it had. That's how long it needed. That's when I would have been here for it. But no, someone couldn't wait that long. Someone had to wake it early. Do you know what happens when my Kraken has not had the sleep it needs? The cave responded with silence. No one was going to attempt to answer. Neptune in this kind of mood. Not that he was known for having any other kind of mood. I'll tell you, it wakes in a rage. Too much of a rage for even Neptune to call it. My truly loyal servant. Someone has robbed me of it. What will it do? Someone asked. The first signs are relatively small. It will lash around in its lair, creating freak waves. This is what it does while it's still in its cave. As far as we know, it still is in there. But it will find a way to open seas sooner or later. And when it does, it will set out the only path it knows. Neptune paused as he slowly surveyed the caves. Destruction. My tail was shaking again. My tail was shaking again. It's okay, little one, Dad whispered, pulling me close. I'll look after you. He knew nothing. Nothing. This is why I am the only one who should wake the Kraken. The one who wakes it is the only one who... Neptune stopped abruptly. He smoothed back in his lair and straightened his beard. Well, let me just tell you this. Without my direction, it can destroy anything in its wake. Perhaps the whole island will crumble from its rage. The end of the island? All because of me? I tried to swallow and found I couldn't. I had to fix this. Oh yes, Neptune continued. And you should know this. It can bring ships toward it, apart from a few of my loyal aides. The Kraken is the only creature who knows how to pierce the magic of the Bermuda Triangle. Once the Kraken leaves its cave, you are no longer safe. Discovery cannot be far. When this happens, the days of All Points Island are numbered. Neptune sucked in his breath again. I have not yet decided what I shall do with you all. In the meantime, I want to know who did this. I will find out. It is imperative that he or she come to me. He stared around the cave in silence. An occasional drop of water plopped softly into the water. No, I couldn't. I wasn't going to get Mom and Dad thrown off the island. I wasn't going back to that awful jail. I had to think of something. Well, he bellowed. Then someone coughed gently. There was a bustling sound up on the stone benches. Someone was getting up. Millie? What on earth was she doing? She flung her black cape over her shoulder. and stepped toward a barrier at the edge of the pool. Your Majesty, she said firmly, I am not one to interfere, but I may be able to help you. Neptune almost smiled. He looked as though he was smiling anyway. It might just as easily have been in anger twisting his face into a contorted frown. He pulled on his beard. Help me? He repeated. I can see things, Millie explained. I don't like to boast, but I have been told I have something of a gift. I just need your star sign. My star sign? Neptune yelled. Yes, you know, your horoscope, your... I know what you mean. It's Pisces, of course. Thank you, Millie said through tight lips. That anger won't do your karma any good at all, she added in a stage whisper. Then she closed her eyes and folded her hands on her chest. I believe I can tell you exactly what had happened, she said. I just need some quiet. Neptune looked as though he was about to burst, but he didn't speak, nor did anyone else. Could you really see what had happened? Millie's cosmic ways didn't often come to much, but she did have an accurate moment now and then. What if this was one of them? I see riches of some sort, Millie murmured. What is it, gold? Let me focus. Gold. She was describing the cave. No, trust Millie to have one of her flukes and get it right when I desperately needed her to come out with her usual wacky nonsense. I'd heard enough. I had to get out before she told them everything. Maybe her vision had me in it. I glanced up and tried to catch Mom's eye. She was watching Millie with a look of admiration on her face. How would she look at me when she had found out what I'd done? I couldn't bear to imagine it. I edged quietly away from Dad, toward the darkness of the back of the pool. I could hear Millie's voice warbling across the water. She sounded as if she was humming. Everyone was watching her. This was my only chance. I'm sorry, I whispered into the darkness and slipped away. I swam frantically through the dark tunnels, not even thinking about where they were leading me. I pounded past underwater stalagmites, faintly lit up with soft glowing crystals, around twists and turns and crevices, almost grasping for the sight of the sky. I had to get out of the caves, had to think. Eventually, I came out into the open water. The light shocked me. Two little blue heads hovered in the cave's mouth, pecking at the rock as though giving it little kisses. A noise behind me, splashing. Someone was following me. I dived down into a thin cave under the rocks, stumbling upon a group of fat hogfish who looked up at me with black eyes after scattering away to find another den. I watched the cave entrance. It was Dad. I swam out from under the rock. What are you doing here? Emily! He swam over towards me. Why have you run away? I retreated further under the rocks. I've let you down. You, Mom, everyone. We'll get thrown off the island. It's all my fault. I'm so sorry. Dad squeezed into the crevice with me, scattering clouds of sand as he slithered along the rock. No one's going to throw you off the island, little Inn. Why would they do that? You don't know, I wailed. You don't know what I've done. Tears snaked down the cheek, mingling with the water. All this time, all those years without him, and now that I'd found him, I'd done something so stupid, so awful, he'd hate me forever. I'd ruined everything. What? What have you done? I bit hard on my lips, squeezing my eyes shut. Whatever it is, you can tell me. We'll figure it out, what to do together. My face was wet with tears. It was me, I blurted out. I woke the Kraken. You what? But how? I went exploring. I knew I shouldn't have, but I did. It was in a cave. I'm so stupid. I found it. I woke it up. Dad, I ruined everything. I'll never be able to show my face on the island again. You've only just got out of prison, and now, Dad, I'm so sorry. Dad stroked my face. Look, I don't quite understand, but it'll be okay. We'll fix this. I'll look after you. I pushed his hand away. Dad, it won't be okay. Don't lie to me. I'm not a baby. He stared at me, his face red as though I'd hit him. As I held his gaze, he nodded slowly, as though he was watching me grow up in front of his eyes, catching up with who I really was instead of who he remembered me being. You're right, he said eventually. Of course you're not. He turned to swim away. Wait, I grabbed his arm. I'm sorry. You know what you are? He asked, his voice as tight as his mouth. I shook my head, holding back fresh tears. You're my daughter. That's what you are. You're a Windsnap. And you know what that means? Before I had a chance to answer, he added, It means we're going to straighten this out. I'm not going back to that meeting. I can't, please. Who said anything about going back there? What then? Dad stopped swimming and searched my face. We're going to the cave. Show me where it happened. The Kraken's cave? Why not? You heard what Neptune said. It's probably still in there. Maybe we can straighten this mess out somehow. Seal it back up so it's safe again or something. Dad, it was really frightening. It was the most terrifying thing ever. Worse than going back to face Neptune? You stood up to him in his own courtroom, remember? I dropped my head. I know, that was pretty frightening too. Exactly, and you did that, so you can handle this as well. I suppose. Come on. He held out his hand. Let's see what we can do. Letting out a breath, it felt as if I'd been holding it in forever. I took his hand and we swam on. It's this way, I said as we came to the lagoon. It looked different. The water was murky and muddier than I remembered. Sand-colored flat fish skimmed over the seabed, moving beneath us like shifting ground. My throat closed up. We reached the carving on the wall, the trident. How on earth could we have missed it the last time? Maybe if we'd seen it, none of this would have happened. It was pointless thinking like that. We came to the pinwheel, except this time, when I looked at it, I realized I knew exactly what it was. The long chute spiraling out from the round body in its center. That's it, I said, my voice rippling like a breaking wave. I don't want to go any further. He stopped swimming. We need to do this, Emily. Dad, you know it's okay if you want to call me. No. He put a finger over his lips. In charge, strong. You're not a baby. You're a scale off the old tail, and I couldn't be more proud of you. And we're going to get to the bottom of this and find out what we can, right? But it's out of bounds. This was how the whole trouble started. And this is how it will end, too, he said. You didn't think we found ourselves at this place by the pair of us doing what we were told, do you? I didn't say anything. He reached out for my hand. Come on, I'll go ahead, but you need to tell me where I'm going. I'll look after you. Eventually, I took his hand and we swam in silence. Everything looked familiar until we came to an enormous gash in the rock, maybe the size of a house. And there, I held out a shaky arm, except it was a tiny hole last time. Dad swallowed. Okay then, you ready? I'll never be ready to go back in there. A solitary fish flashed past me, a soft green on one side, bright blue on the other. Its see-through fin stretched back as it swam away from the cave. Sensible fish. Come on, you'll be okay. I'm right beside you. He squeezed my hand, and we edged inside, slipping back through the rock. But it was completely different. So different that I started to wonder if we were in the wrong place. There were no thin winding tunnels, just a huge gaping chasm all the way back. We swam through them all, and then we came to gold. We were in the right place. Jewels and crystals lay scattered across the seabed. As we swam closer, the surroundings felt less familiar, colder, and there was something else, something very different. The deeper we got, the more we saw of them. Bones. Just a few at first, that could possibly have passed for driftwood. Then more, clumps of them, piled up like remains of a huge banquet, long, thin bones, twisty fat ones, and then a skull, lying on the seafloor. A dark fish slipped through an eye socket. I clapped a hand across my mouth. Dad! I gripped his hand so hard I felt his knuckles crack. Don't look at them, he said, his voice wobbling. Just stay close to me. We swam into every bit of the cave, every inch. What do you see? Dad asked as we paused in the center of the biggest chasm. I looked around. Nothing. Exactly. He turned to face me suddenly, not in charge anymore. Not strong. Just scared. It's gone, Emily. The Kraken. It's on the loose. How long have we been here? A couple of days. Who knows? All I know is we're stranded on a deserted scrap of an island. The boat's broken and I'm hungry. And scared. Nuts. How long can a person live on nuts and water from an iffy-looking stream? Dad figures he'll catch up some fish soon, and he thinks we could fix a boat if we all shaped up a little. He is acting as if he's on some kind of Boy Scout trip, as if this is all part of the adventure. I know he's putting on, though. He's too manic. I can see the truth in his eyes. He's just as scared as I am. Mom's hardly spoken. It's best that way. If we talked more, we might end up talking about what happened, about how we could have died, about the... Anyway, it's hardly even an island. I could vaguely see something that might be a real island out at sea. Far too far to swim. Just our luck to get stranded on this tiny speck of island instead. 200 paces from one side to the other. I counted yesterday, or the day before. I don't remember. Sometime when I was collecting twigs so that Dad could build us a so-called shelter. Not that I'm likely to get any sleep. It lends itself to a touch of insomnia, getting stranded out on an island, the size of a pair of underpants, with nothing to eat, no way of getting home, and no one to talk to except your parents. Not even the captain. That's another thing we don't talk about. I try not to think about that either. What happened to him? Couldn't he be... My hands started to shake uncontrollably. My legs feel as if they'd give way any second. Like I said, best not to think about that. There's a splashing noise behind me. Mandy, where's your mom? It's Dad, coming out of the water with one of the nets from the boat. He's wearing purple shorts down to his knees, and he's wading onto shore in his slippers. He's been looking out for fish. That's all he's done since we've been here. That and mess around banging and hammering on the boat. It's washed up on a tiny beach, half filled with water and littered with shells and stones and broken bottles. Yeah, sure, Dad, it's going to be an easy fix. The net's empty, as usual. Dad pulls the mask and snorkel off. He's grinning. What on earth can he find to smile about? Doesn't he realize we're stranded and we're all going to die? Maybe he got knocked on the head when the boat went under. He's shaking himself dry. Come with me. I've got something important to tell you. I followed him back to the pathetic bundle of twigs that seemed to have become our home. Mom's sitting on the ground, leaning against a palm tree. She's not on the ground. She's not doing anything. She's just staring into space. Her hair's sticking out everywhere, as though she had had an electric shock. Her face is white, her eyes in focus. She looks like a madwoman. Maureen, Mandy, our problems are over, Dad announces. I can't help it. I burst out laughing. Look around, Dad. Wake up and smell the coffee. Oh, sorry, I forgot. There isn't any coffee because we're marooned on a strip of land you could miss if you blinked, with nothing but nuts, insects, and a smashed-up boat for company. Just hear me out, Dad says. You're not going to believe me, but I swear every word is true. There's a tick beating against his red cheek. I swear, he repeats. Mom sighs. Just tell us, what ridiculous idea have you come up with now? It's not an idea, Mo. Well, not exactly. It's something I've seen. Mom raised her head a fraction. What have you seen, then? Dad puffs out his chest and looks from one of us to the other. Mermaids. I watched the lump in his throat bob up and down. I've seen mermaids. Oh, for heaven's sake, Jack. Mom pulls herself up and shakes out her shirt. When are you going to act like a proper man and fix this mess, rather than indulging in your stupid fantasies? She starts to walk off, wiping sand off the backs of her legs. Dad grabs her arm. It is not a fantasy, Maureen, she said furiously. I swear on every breath I've ever taken. There are mermaids. Not here, farther out. I've seen them swimming under the water. They've got tails, long, glistening, shining tails. Their eyes are locked. It's as if they're acting out some surreal sketch, and the teacher has just said, okay, freeze, everybody. But there's something about what he said, something just out of reach. Don't you understand what this means? Dad says, his neck bright red and bulging. He's gripping Mom's arm. Mom stares at him. No, Jack, I'm afraid I don't know what it all means. That you're cracking up, perhaps? Well, don't worry. I'm sure I won't be far behind you. She pulls out of his grip. No, I'm not cracking up, he shouts. You've got to believe me. We could save our home, the amusement arcade, the whole pier. He turns to me, his eyes wide and intense. Mandy, you believe me, don't you? Of course I don't believe him. Of course I don't. But there's something. What is it? Mom's shaking her head. You'll forgive me if I don't quite follow your logic. Dad holds up his net. We capture one. Take it back to Brightport. We can have it on show. Charge admission and everything. We'll take care of it, of course. Give it a good life. People will travel from all over the country to see it, from all over the world, maybe. We'll be heroes in our town. We'll pay for the pier to be renovated. Don't you see? This could be the solution to all of our problems. Mom sucks in her cheeks. Jack, she says, you haven't managed to catch so much as a goldfish since we got here. Even if I were to believe you that you'd seen a mermaid, which frankly I don't, how in heaven do you propose to catch the thing? Dad pulls at his net. I haven't got this whole plan figured out yet, have I? I've only just seen them, a group of them, swimming in the deep water. One of them had gold stars shining in her tail. There was a merman, too, with long black hair and a shiny silver tail. A merman, for God's sakes, Marine. He grips her arm again. I'm telling the truth. You see I am. Mom pulls away and turns to me. Come on, Mandy. Help me get some dinner. I've had enough of your father and his daydreams for one afternoon. I followed Mom as we pick our way through undergrowth, scavenging for food like vagrants. As usual, we don't talk, but this time it's because of the thoughts going around in my head. Thoughts I'm not sure I dare share with Mom. There's definitely something familiar with what Dad said. Something not... Something gnawingly away in the back in my mind. I can't put my finger on it. Maybe it's something I've seen on TV, a film about mermaids or something. I've got this picture in my mind. Someone swimming. She's got a tail and she's spinning around, smiling, grinning at me. She's in a pool. It's all from TV. I'm sure it isn't. It feels real. It feels like a memory. I grab a couple of nuts and shove them hard into my pocket. Mermaids. As if. I forced myself not to laugh. I forced myself to laugh. We better get away from here before we all crack up. And that completes chapter 4 of Emily Windsnap and the Monster from the Deep. I hope you enjoyed. Please like, comment, and subscribe if you want awesome random content. And I'll make out. Peace.